Hello and welcome to Education Matters. I'm your host, Harry Jackson. Today, we have a special guest with us on USANow.tv, Mr. Ian Pryor from Fight for Schools. He's been a prior guest on this network about 6 months ago. He's here to give us an update and tell us a little bit about his program, about some of the issues that are impacting his community in Loudoun County, how it can impact other jurisdictions across the country. Mr. Pryor, welcome. Good morning.
Thanks for having me.
Ian, thank you for joining us again. Thank you for joining our network. Could you please tell us a little bit about yourself, about your background? Why did you move to Loudoun County? Why did you Fight for Schools? Why is this issue? Why are these issues so important?
Sure. So, I'm originally from New England, went to law school in Boston, worked in the, legal industry for 10 years, then eventually got into campaigning and politics, moved down to Washington in 2013, was at the Department of Justice from 2017 to 2018 as the Principal Deputy Director of Public Affairs. And it was right around that time that we moved to Loudoun in 2018 at the beginning, really just trying to get into a neighborhood, have some more space for kids to play. And, one of the reasons why we felt comfortable moving from Alexandria to Loudoun was because of the school system and the reputation that the school system had. So we came out here. I eventually started up my own public affairs practice and was doing that for a little while. And then I started, digging into some of the things that I was hearing in really the summer of 2020 with respect to Loudoun County Public Schools and sort of its leftward lurch and, the consultants it was using and spending money on. That takes us to last year, of course, where there was the famed anti-racist parents of Loudoun County Facebook enemies list that wanted to plot against parents that, God forbid, had a different point of view that they were sharing with the school board. And that really led to our efforts to gather signatures on petitions to remove the 6 school board members that were part of that. And of course, the rest is history. I mean, that was really the inflection point for the removal efforts. But everything that happened since then, really has just been, insane in Loudoun County, from putting Tanner Cross on suspension for exercising his First Amendment rights to maintain the mask mandate during after the governor was elected and issued his executive order to, covering up a sexual assault while the school board stood by and listened to the superintendent misstate facts. Why? Because they wanted to pass a policy that would allow individuals to use the bathroom of the gender with which they identified with. So there's been no shortage of controversies in Loudoun County Public Schools. And, we started Fight for Schools back in April of last year. We've raised probably $500,000 since we started. Most of that has gone towards our court fees and these removal attempts. But, once we get into election season, we're going to have 2 special elections in the fall this year. And then, at least 2 special elections in the fall this year, and then we'll have the elections in 2023. So our goal is really to, change the school board and make sure that, not that it leans one way or the other. That's really not our goal. Our goal is to make sure that we have nonpartisan, responsible lawmakers that put education and student safety ahead of their political ideologies.
Well, thank you. You've, in a lot of aspects, actually, in many ways, Loudoun County is ground zero for fighting against a movement that's really spreading across the country, not only in Loudoun County, but in Fairfax, also in San Francisco with Lowell School District, and in New York with Stuyvesant, and in Philadelphia, doing their efforts on reducing and limiting meritocracy for admissions to Central High School. So you mentioned a really good point that why a lot of parents are involved with this, with indoctrination. What are some of these indoctrination efforts that we see or trying to impress upon our children, our youth? What ideology? Why is it so harmful?
Yeah. Well, there's 2 things really. There's the umbrella of critical race theory, right? And the left is, it's just a college course, it's a law school course. No. Critical race theory has been in education really since the late 90s. There's, I can't tell you how many education books on it there are. But broadly speaking, critical race theory stands for the idea that Age of Enlightenment rationalism, constitutional jurisprudence, equality theory, the rule of law are all systemically racist, and they need to be deconstructed and rebuilt along the equitable model, which guarantees equality of results, not equality of opportunity. And so you see that in schools, in Loudoun and in Fairfax in 2 different ways. You see it systemically, right? So in Fairfax, you see that system working, that critical race theory injection into the system with Thomas Jefferson High School. Saw it in Loudoun County with the academies of Loudoun, right? And what they do is they say, well, we're going to make these changes to the admissions process. We're going to strip down some of these merit-based requirements like geometry, or get rid of these two tests. And then we're going to consider the holistic approach, right? We're going to talk about equity. We're going to talk about diversity. It's not going to be, race neutral or race blind. But we're going to categorize it as geographical or socioeconomic. But what you see, and you saw it in Fairfax, and we've seen it in Loudoun County, is once you get into the emails, then you start to see things like, oh, this seems anti-Asian, or, this really needs to be about Black students, not about socioeconomic or geography. That's what the emails we have in Loudoun. So really what they do is they categorize it in these phrases of geographical and socioeconomic as a pretext for what they're trying to do, which is to inject race consciousness into the admissions process, which is against the law. It's unconstitutional. So that's how you see it at the systemic level. At the programmatic level, which is at school, there you start to see really through the teacher trainings where they start introducing these concepts, right? So in Loudoun County, probably the most egregious thing that we saw from a teacher training was the oppressor matrix, right? Where, if you're white or if you're Asian, then you are an oppressor. If you're Black or Hispanic, you're oppressed. If you're a dark-skinned minority, you're oppressed vis-a-vis a light-skinned person of that same minority. If you're fat, you're oppressed. If you're thin, you're an oppressor. So they try and basically create all these different identities. And it's not just about race. It's literally every way they can slice and dice the population into little identity groups, they're going to do it. And then ultimately you see that start to work its way into the classroom. One of the videos that went viral last year was a student. He was given a picture of two individuals. One looked like she was Black. The other one looked like she was white. They were actually sisters. And he refused to discuss their race. He says, look, I just see two people chilling. And the teacher just berated him to see race, to see race, to see race. Well, lo and behold, we got some of the handouts from that class, and the handouts were teaching about white fragility. Our friend Robin DiAngelo, white supremacy, not the kind of white supremacy of Klan hoods and whatnot, but just sort of existing. What was it? Cultural appropriation. All these things that they start teaching. So that's the critical race theory piece. As far as the gender piece, I think that is where we're really starting to see things this year. And again, it's systemic and it's programmatic. Systemic is, people get to use the bathroom of the gender with which they identify in the locker rooms. Teachers and students are compelled to use the pronouns of other students that they choose. And worst of all, parents don't have a right to know, especially in Loudoun County Public Schools. I don't know if it's the same way in other schools in Virginia, if their child is claiming gender neutral stat or gender fluid status or transgender status at school. And so
parents do not have a right in Fairfax.
Yeah, they don't have a right. It's crazy. And that's that's a violation of the 14th Amendment. It's a violation of the Virginia parental rights law. But making that even more problematic is, from kindergarten till, 12th grade, they are pushing this stuff, right? They're pushing the gender unicorn. They're pushing books where, a 5-year-old girl comes home and says, hey, mom, dad, I'm a boy now. And the parents are like, well, you know best. You're 5, you're old enough to know everything. So, and that has the dangerous effect of those two things combining, where you start leading a child down this transition path. And if you don't affirm as a parent, well, then you cannot be part of that process. We are one step short of, laws that say if you don't affirm, you're going to get Child Protective Services coming in and taking your child away. It is a very, very scary thing. So while, look, critical race theory, gender theory are all part of the same pie. I think when you're looking at gender theory, you're looking at some very significant long-term damage that these schools are essentially promoting.
It's kind of interesting. You mentioned before, like we're having this push have this moving towards race and towards gender. Are there minority groups that are pushing for this? Are you encountering that? What are the people that are typically promoting this? What do they look like?
Well, in Loudoun, we joke around and call them Chardonnay Antifa. They're usually, your white left wing, and I don't say liberal, and I'll explain why in a minute. Your white left wing moms that sit behind a computer, drinking Chardonnay late into the night, attacking everybody on Twitter, not elected officials, but other individuals, pushing this stuff, right? It's all for to stop systemic racism. It's like, well, you're living in $1.4 million house. Okay. What are you actually doing to stop this systemic racism? So that's what you're getting it from them, but you're also getting it from the consultants, right? You're getting it from the consultant class that makes boatloads of money coming in, $500,000 the Equity Collaborative made off of Loudoun County taxpayers in 2019 alone to come up with a report that did focus groups that excluded Asian and Caucasian parents discussing, systemic racism in Loudoun County Public Schools. So they they exclude the parent group of the largest minority in Loudoun County Public Schools. Yet the superintendent will come back and say, well, we're a majority minority county now. It's like, well, you're not taking account of the largest minority in your community by having studies and focus groups when you specifically exclude that group.
Incredible. So there's a lot that's happened in the last 6 months, and you were on a program before. So let's talk about the school board issues, about what happened yesterday. I believe today's September 28th. What happened with the issues with the governor, and in order to have the special elections? Can you give us some background and some updates with that?
So it's really fascinating what happened, and I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword, or maybe glass half full, half empty. And I'm kind of looking at the glass half full right now. A couple of weeks ago, Glenn Youngkin amended a bill proposed by a member of the House of Delegates in Loudoun, and that bill would have staggered school board elections. And that's not actually a bad idea, because the way things worked is, in every 4 years, you would elect an entire 9 school board members. And in 2019, you had 7 brand new school board members and 2 that remained. And so a lot of the things you can say happened. You've got amateur hour up on the school board because they've never done it before. So the idea was, we're going to stagger it so that you don't flip the whole school board or risk flipping the whole school board every cycle. Instead, you do it every 2 years. That was amended by Governor Youngkin to say, fine, but you're going to have a Loudoun County School Board election this year in 2022. Now that would have been great. I mean, that would have been fantastic for what we're trying to do, because when you're talking about a school board, it's not like Congress where, look, I can afford to wait a year to knock this congressman out or congresswoman out, or even a senator. I mean, you can afford to wait because they're dealing with bigger, more, not substantial, but bigger federal issues. But at the school level, can you really afford to wait another year for a school board as disastrous as Loudoun County? So there was certainly hope that this would pass. Now, it passed the House of Delegates, and it was defeated in the Virginia Senate, which has a Democrat majority. 1 Republican crossed over and voted with Democrats. Now, on one hand, you say, well, it's disappointing because we would have loved to have that election this year. On the other hand, I can't help but feeling that Glenn Youngkin just set a massive trap for Senate Democrats, because at the same time as all of this is going on, there is currently a grand jury sitting in Loudoun County, a special grand jury investigating the Loudoun County School Board, which means every single person that cast their vote to protect the Loudoun County School Board is gambling. They're gambling that grand jury is going to come back and say, we looked and there's nothing to see here. Now, that's a possibility, but is it a probability? I would think probably not, given that grand juries generally don't get convened to look at civil infractions. They get convened to look at serious criminal issues. So that's number one. And I think that in 2023, all those senators, depending on what's going to happen, are going to have to wear the Loudoun County School Board around their necks as they go campaign. The second thing that was interesting, all we've ever heard out here in Loudoun County is the removal process, that, how we were trying to remove school boards. It's anti-democratic. It's anti-election. We're just a bunch of right-wing insurrectionists, alt-right, QAnon, like whatever, lunatics that are trying to suppress the vote. Well, apparently, if you look at what the Democrat senators said yesterday, they're like, no, we're not going to pass this amendment. The proper thing to do if the parents are unhappy with their school board members is, and they call it the recall, removal, whatever you want to call it, is the recall process. Okay, so you've got the Senate Democrats saying that's the proper procedure, but in Loudoun County, you've got the Democrats, crying and whining that it's anti-democratic. Well, when we get to court next month, we're going to make sure that the evidence of what the Senate Democrat said is entered into the record, because this is not about suppressing the vote. This is not about Republican versus Democrat. This is about enforcing the rule of law. This is about enforcing our rights as citizens to make sure that our school board members are fulfilling their fiduciary obligations to their constituents. And up till now, they haven't been doing so.
Well, thank you. So you mentioned before, you don't have a grand jury convene for just any run-of-the-mill offense. What are some of the offenses that they're investigating with your school board members?
Well, that's a great question. And what we do know is that in Governor Youngkin's Executive Order 4, he authorized Attorney General Jason Miyares' office to investigate Loudoun County Public Schools' handling of sexual assaults in 2021 and beyond. Right. And so is the May 28th, there was a sexual assault at Stonebridge High School. On June 22nd, while they're trying, and that was in a bathroom by a boy who was allegedly wearing a skirt, allegedly gender fluid. Not that that's particularly relevant. Those are the allegations. They were stated in court back in August. And so the question was asked of Scott Ziegler, the superintendent, on June 22nd, while they're trying to debate Policy 8040, which would allow people to use whatever bathroom they want. Are there any records, or is there a continuous pattern of sexual assaults in our bathrooms? And Ziegler said, I'm not aware of any records of sexual assaults in our bathrooms. Okay. Policy passes on August 11th. On October 6th, another girl is sexually assaulted. And I want to clarify, because some people say there were 2 rapes. That's not the case. The second girl was sexually assaulted, but it was not, categorized as a rape. It was groping. It was, forced into a classroom. I mean, still horrible, but I just want the record to be clear. And that was at a different high school. Well, it turned out it was the same kid that sexually assaulted and sodomized the girl on May 28th. That comes out the next week. So now we know that the superintendent, and the superintendent on May 28th, the same day that first sexual assault happened, emailed the entire board. So now we know that the board knew, the superintendent knew on May 28th. On June 22nd, the superintendent falsely stated that there were no records of sexual assaults in bathrooms. The school board did nothing to correct the record. Why? Because they wanted to pass that policy. They come out the next day, as they should have, and said, listen, superintendent inadvertently, made a misstatement of fact. There are records of sexual assaults in bathrooms, but because of privacy considerations, we can't discuss those. Well, people would have figured out pretty quickly what happened. It would have gotten out, and that policy probably wouldn't have passed. At least there would have been even more outrage than there already was. And they didn't want that to happen, because that would have stopped the policy or made the policy really difficult to pass. So going back to Attorney General Miyares, he was tasked with investigating that. Now, look, prosecutions, investigations, the scope changes. The prosecutors can go back, ask for a scope change. I mean, we saw it in the Mueller investigation all the time, where Bob Mueller would go back to the Deputy Attorney General and ask for a change in scope. So it's not clear if they've expanded that scope or not. But what we do know, at least from reports, is that a grand jury has been convening since April 7th and investigating this matter.
Wow, incredible. So I guess the questions that you've shared with us a lot, like where do we go from here, is that, parents, they have to be involved. It seems, what can you review with us? What happened with what roadblocks did you encounter with the first recall attempt with your school board members? If we could just quickly revisit that.
So the first removal attempt was with Beth Bartz. We filed that in August. In October, we get to court, and so the biggest hurdle in any removal attempt is the Commonwealth attorney. Now, if you have an unbiased, rock solid Commonwealth attorney that's going to go where the facts take them, then, okay, that's fantastic. But we don't have that. We have Buddha Bibarai. She's a Soros-backed Commonwealth attorney. She's fully aligned with Steve Descano in Fairfax. So we moved to disqualify her, and we moved to intervene in the case, and Bart's attorney moved to quash the case. So we had to argue all of those three motions. We won all three of them, which was huge, and we had an independent prosecutor appointed in Biberai's place. By all accounts, he was, again, one of those prosecutors that will follow the facts and go where the facts take him. She eventually resigned, a week and a half later. We believe, despite claims to the contrary from the other side, that at least where that process was played a significant role in her resignation. She resigned after the news broke of the sexual assaults, but I don't believe that it had anything to do with her role or anything, or any outsized role in that. Quite the contrary. I think it was actually quite smart of her to resign when she did, because now we're seeing sort of all the things that have happened since then. We're currently in court with the former chair and vice chair, and this has been, they've now circled the wagons to try and kill this thing. We had hearings in January, same thing, motion to quash, or motion to disqualify, motion to intervene. Shortly thereafter, we're going to get a ruling from the judge. The judge recuses. We don't know why the judge recused. Then the whole bench in Loudoun County recused. So it took us a while after that to get a judge appointed by the Supreme Court. By all accounts, the judge is a straight shooter, but somewhere in that time frame, Biberai recuses herself from one of the cases, claiming, "Well, me and Atusa Reeser, we're on the Loudoun County bar, so I'm going to recuse myself." Now we've got a guy from Charlottesville, a Commonwealth attorney, and look, we hope that he's going to do the right thing and be objective. But the fact of the matter is, he's part of the Virginia Progressive Prosecutors for Justice with 11 other Commonwealth attorneys, which include Buddha Biberai, Steve Descano, the Arlington Commonwealth attorney, and it certainly feels to a lot of us that somehow this was worked around behind the scenes to get a prosecutor that would be claimed independent, but ultimately is an ally of Biberai. So it remains to be seen how that plays out. It's a little frustrating, though, to see Senate Democrats yesterday talking about the removal process, while we know that they're doing everything they can in the background to kill that removal process.
Well, thank you. I mean, as a parent, thank you for speaking up for all parents in this fight. It seems like you are certainly fighting against the machine. They say, well, here's the process to go through that, but then we see through the back door. They're doing everything they can to undermine that, and then complain when we actually have a governor that is elected because he's going to fight for parents, and he actually has a attorney general that will also fight for parents and prosecute. Sir, thank you. So before we wrap up, any final thoughts?
A couple of things. First of all, I want to give a shout out to the parents in Fairfax, because, everyone talks about Loudoun County, right? But parents in Fairfax were at this well before we were. I mean, they were out there collecting signatures for their removal efforts before it was even a thought in our minds. They were out there in the freezing cold. We understand the cold factor because we were out there on election day in 2021, but largely a lot of our stuff was done during the summer. It was, we had lower numbers, et cetera. So I want to give a shout out to them because they actually helped provide a lot of the inspiration for some of the things that we did. But beyond that, for the people that say, well, Loudoun stayed blue. And Loudoun did stay blue, you're right. But it went from a 26-point Joe Biden win or 25-point Joe Biden win in 2020 to an 11-point Terry McAuliffe win in 2021. And beyond that, Loudoun County is really the reason, and Fairfax County, Northern Virginia, why the rest of Virginia voted for Glenn Youngkin. So beyond the gains of Youngkin in those two counties, it also helped inspire the rest of the state. And then the other piece, I keep seeing, we've got a Board of Supervisors member out here, Julie Briskman. Her claim to fame is giving the middle finger to Donald Trump at the Trump National Golf Course. Yeah, she said, it's a loud, radical, vocal minority. Okay, so you're saying, 45% is a loud, vocal minority? Okay, well, keep saying that, right? Keep dismissing us. And that minority is going to get closer and closer and closer to a majority. And it's not a majority of Republicans, right? That's one of the things that's important. It doesn't matter that, okay, I've worked in Republican politics or other people have worked in Republican politics. What matters is this issue. And this issue is not a Republican issue. This is an issue that, transcends political ideologies. It transcends race. It transcends religion, ethnicity. And then what happens is the candidates running for office get a chance to either side with this coalition or oppose this coalition. As it stands, Glenn Youngkin, Republicans have sided with this coalition. Now, it remains to be seen, over the next couple of years, how committed they are to continuing to back this coalition. But as of now, from most Democrats, what you've seen is nothing more than this is dark money funded. This is all top down. This is all, the Koch brothers. And I've never gotten, these big $1 million checks that everybody claims. And if they have, and if maybe they're in my glove compartment, I don't know. I'm a Boston Red Sox fan. There are stories about when Manny Ramirez played for the Red Sox, he would have checks for like $2 million that were like in his glove compartment for months. And they had to like reissue them because they had expired. Well, I don't have that in my glove compartment. What we do have, and you can certainly check on Virginia Public Access project, a lot of small dollar donations from people in Virginia, from people all over the country. We are truly a grassroots organization that, really has relied on the savvy of the parents in Loudoun County to make this a movement, not just in Loudoun, not just in Virginia, but nationally. And I think that, the parents in Loudoun County, the parents in Fairfax have really become a symbol for the rest of the country. And you're seeing it all over the place now. I mean, every school district has parents groups that are pushing back, that are discovering what's going on in their school systems. So, I would ask, continue to support us. We've got a long road ahead of us. We've got our removal cases. We're hopefully going to be successful there. We've got another couple of tricks up our sleeves too. And hopefully we can flip this school board, and whether it's in 2022 or whether it's in 2023, people aren't going to stop until they have a voice on their school board that will commit itself to nonpartisanship and not putting political ideologies ahead of educational excellence, student safety, and parental involvement in their children's education.
Great. Well, thank you, sir. Well, Mr. Ian Pryor, thank you, sir. Thank you for joining us on Education Matters.
Thanks for having me again.
Well, that wraps up another episode. Thank you for joining us. You can see this episode of Education Matters on usanow.tv as well as several others. Tune in. You can see a bunch of other programming that we offer. And again, thank you and good night.